Mics are live. Hey everyone, welcome to the GLAAD Pride Chat. My name is Tommy McFly, a radio and TV host here in Washington. We've got an awesome group with us today to talk about global pride, all presented by the Ariadne Getty Foundation. Thank you so much for the awesome support. And by the way, on the GLAAD's website, some great resources and previews of this weekend's big global pride. So let's go ahead and bring in our awesome panel. We got a bunch of speakers with us today and a bunch of friends joining us from across the country and around the world. Madonna Cacciatore is here. Good morning or good afternoon, Madonna. I usually host a morning show. Sorry.
Afternoon.
What are calendars anymore, right? What's time?
It's irrelevant.
Teague Milan is with us as well. Hey, Teague, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Great. Heidi Ellis is here. Hey, Heidi.
Hello.
And Sarah Kate Ellis is with us as well from GLAAD. Hey, Sarah. We'll let you get started with our introductions today. What brings you to this conversation?
Well, I'm the president and CEO of GLAAD. GLAAD is the leading LGBTQ media advocacy organization. We work globally to ensure that acceptance is moved forward for the LGBTQ community. And I think this is an exceptionally important and powerful Pride this year. And I'm excited to talk about why.
Teague Milan, how are you?
Great.
What brings you to the conversation today?
I'm always down to have interesting conversations with interesting folks. It's a real important time of the year. It's an important time in the world right now. There's so many things happening. I'm a writer and advocate and strategist, and so I'm happy to be here and have this conversation.
And we've many of us have seen you on Netflix already in Disclosure, the brand new documentary.
Great. I'm glad everybody saw it. Make sure everybody goes and checks it out on Netflix. I think it's trending. If you don't have Netflix, hit me up. I'll give you my code. I'll give you my password.
That's a good friend right there. Going to the West Coast, Madonna Cacciatore, how are you?
I'm great. Glad to be here too, and with this great panel. I mean, I'm here for the same reasons everyone else is. We're in an incredible time in our history and in the history of the movement of pride organizations around the world.
Heidi Ellis joins us as well from DC, across town from me, former Obama official. What brings you to the conversation today?
Thank you for having me. I mean, everyone has kind of said what I feel. I think it's a really important time. I work at the intersections of LGBTQ issues and racial justice. So I think it is the time now, and I want us to keep the energy. So I'm happy to be part of conversations like this because I don't want this to be a flash in the pan. I really want this to be long-term changes that we're making within our community, and then how do we affect the external pieces as well.
And we're thrilled to have everyone with us today. We're going to bring everyone into the conversation. I'm going to ask questions, but also feel free to jump in and let's have a chat about it. With Global Pride coming up and happening, the specific Global Pride celebration, but also how is Pride celebrated for you globally?
Are you asking me?
In general, yeah. Let's go to you first. Absolutely. You probably have the best view of global pride.
I think for me, this global pride is about connecting. Our community is so important, our sense of community as LGBTQ people. And with COVID-19 and this extreme isolation, which is detrimental to our community. And so many globally experience this on a daily basis. What we're experiencing for 3 months or whatever long this trajectory is going to be, so many people who live in countries where it's still illegal to be LGBTQ live in this isolation on a daily basis. And so I think to have a virtual Pride this year is really significant, especially for those people who live globally in countries where it's not accepted. Additionally, I think that I'm so glad it's Pride right now and that there's this convergence of the Black Lives Matter movement and Pride Month, and we're able to leverage the Pride platform for Black Lives Matter, because I've always been a big believer that we will never do this individually as individual marginalized people. Even though the LGBTQ community represents intersectionality, it hasn't necessarily lived up to it. But we are people. We are disabled people. We are people of color. We are women. We are immigrants, and I think that this is a continuation and a growth and an evolution for us, and we have to center the conversation around Black voices and Black storytelling.
Teek, you've been an advocate and now you have a global platform. What does Global Pride mean to you?
I think this year is really different. Think about last year. Last year was such a huge celebration. It was World Pride. I know I partied so hard, like every single day last June. Okay. But this year I've been fighting every single day this June. And I think it's really important for us as we're celebrating Pride that we start to understand and really call in into the spirit and the roots of what Pride is. Pride started out as a protest and a fight before it was a parade. And I think that people are feeling that. So I think it's important that we go into Pride with that feeling of fight, with that feeling of understanding that there's so much further that we need to go. There's a time for us to clink glasses and a time for us to dance and have fun. And I want that for all of us. And at the same time, let's not lose sight of how we got here and all the lives that we lost getting here and all the people who've put themselves on the line, getting to this place, and the people who are still putting themselves on the line. So I'm hoping with this Global Pride and what I'm seeing with all the conversations that I've been having this June is that that's what's happening. The people are starting to understand and are starting to look at this from a different perspective than they did last year. And I think that this perspective is as important as the huge, amazing, and beautiful, glittery celebrations that we had.
Heidi, you were saying that in Global Pride, you do a lot of work on a small level, but that's actually really important on a global movement too.
Yeah, absolutely. I work both at national and state level, DC, district level, soon state level, right? Everybody put out good juju for that. But yes, I've been engaging a lot of local organizations, including our public schools, an organization that I work really closely with, Strengthen Our Voices, which was part of the promo for this, that does mental health trainings in schools and really promotes mental wellness. So I've been doing a lot of conversations where we highlight that and understanding to Sarah Kate's point that this was a time for isolation, like more so than usual for our community, and finding resources and developing spaces for people to be engaged and have those conversations and feel supported. So I've been doing a lot of that, and then having the conversation about what does it mean to be Black and gay in this year of our Lord. So just really honing in on those conversations, because as Teek said, I frankly have been treating Pride as a party, but I also push my fellow colleagues every time, no matter what position I was in, to think about this deeper, because I always say if one part of our population is not free, then none of us are truly free. So yes, to your point, we can keep partying, but we should always maintain that energy in terms of thinking about how can we expand this conversation? How can we share resources, right? That is such a big thing that I talk about all the time. So that's kind of what this Pride has meant for me. And then for me, I shared a little bit, I have an international background. My mother is half German, half Brazilian. I have family across the globe. Who I've, actually recently come out to in the last, I would say 5 years. I've done a slow rollout. So for them to be able to see things happening on, I say on the ground, but virtually, and then being supportive of that movement and understanding that it all connects to what we're doing here in America. And then they have a personal a window in because they know me. So to me, there's a lot of meetings happening during this month, but I think specifically just really honing in on these conversations and understanding that we can't lose the momentum.
And Madonna, with LA Pride being such a huge force in the history of Pride, the future of Pride on a global level, what does it mean for you, and how is it looking on your end?
Well, everybody said, kind of what I've been feeling as well, is a pivotal time in history, and it's our 50th anniversary this year as well. So 50 years ago, our founders of Christopher Street West sued the police to get a permit for the first permitted Pride parade in the world. And the word permit this time around doesn't necessarily have the same, it has a negative vibe in this current time, because then it means police, and that's where people are most uncomfortable. So we're really walking, for me, it's been really an opportunity for us to look at ourselves and look at the way we've done things and look at sort of the status quo of what Pride looks like, and really just reinvent ourselves and go. I agree 100%. Like I grew up, I came out in the 70s. So, I was living in DC for 11 years. And so my activism really came to the forefront during the AIDS epidemic. I lost my brother in New York and a whole circle of friends. And I started to see, where see discrimination at its worst during that time for me. I had never seen that level of people being dying without their families and being discriminated against in that way. And this movement has reminded me that we just can't ever stop until everybody is treated fairly and equally. And now, more than ever, we just need to reinvent our pride movement to really the intersectionality. And I love that sort of how that's being looked at in this day and time, like the intersectionality of who we are and where we are in the movement. We had the All Black Lives Matter march here, which was the intersectionality of the people of color and the LGBTQ community. And I haven't felt that energy in a very long time. It was peaceful, it was strong, and it was also incredibly powerful. And I feel like those are the roots that we really want to get back to for LA Pride as well.
And anyone jump in on the next question, as we all have spent so much time in isolation and now we're all sort of coming out at a safe social distance. How has social media impacted the Pride movement, the intersection of the Black Lives Matter and Pride movement? Is it all good? Is there some bad to it? What are your thoughts on where we're going as we're sharing Pride on the internet this year?
I'll jump in. I think having Pride on the internet. I think there's a good and a bad. I think the good is that social media is always what it has done is kind of democratize people's access to creating media and telling their own stories, which is great. So people are able to tell their stories. People who typically would not have access or have the platform to tell their stories. People are able to share different stuff through their Instagram feed and on their Twitter. Now the flip side of that is that what can happen is allyship, and this fight can start to look like a performance, where people are just performing this, where they're just sharing these things, but that is not sustainable. Like, I appreciate all of that, right? But then what's the next step? The next step is making sure that there are structural changes. If you are a person in a leadership position, if you are a person in a position of innovation, that you're not only sharing your stories on your Instagram and your Twitter feed, but you're taking back this information to your folks, to the places that you work, to your family, and you are making structural changes, and you're making emotional and spiritual changes to the people who need it the most. So that's what I want to see. And I think that that's kind of the two sides of the coin of having all of this movement and all of this conversation happening in a virtual kind of context.
Sarah Kate, I'd love your thoughts on this too, because as GLAAD, you sort of have to stand up and be the watchdog too for I don't want to use the term fake news, but like the trolls and the incorrect things that are out there about the community. And how are you standing up, and how is GLAAD leading the way in that?
I often refer to us as storm chasers, right? Whatever the cultural moment is, we have to go in to the eye of the storm and figure out how we're going to raise the voices of LGBTQ people and make sure that they're not forgotten. So as soon as COVID-19 hit, we were virtually erased from the conversation. We weren't even virtually. We were erased from the conversation as a community. And fortunately or unfortunately, it's a double edge. It's actually bad. The Black community was raised because there were actual statistics on how COVID-19 was affecting the Black community, which gave it a narrative and helped, I think also led to, I think it was obviously there's 400 years of history, but I think that there were pivotal moments leading in the past 3 months to what's happening now. And I think for us, we were invisible, and we're invisible in a lot of, because you have to self-identify. But I know, being a community leader, that we are disproportionately unhealthy. We are disproportionately don't have access to healthcare. We are disproportionately have disease and lack of employment, and that a disproportionate amount of LGBTQ people and people of color were a part of those layoffs or, the unemployment. And so raising that conversation. The one place that we saw we could make a difference actually was with the FDA, right? Like there was a moment to take what has been a 12-month ban on gay and bisexual men giving blood and turn it into a media moment to push the FDA to lower that discriminatory ban, because it actually just, it's based out of stigma. There's no science. It is all stigma, no science. And so so we did that. When it came to, when we saw the Black Lives Matter moment happening, we jumped in there and we tried to raise the voice and the profile of especially trans women of color who are being murdered on the street, and there is no media attention around it. We've tried. It's like beating our heads against the wall. And finally, we're starting to see that. We wrote a playbook on this for journalists and media so that they could report on this 3 years ago. We push it out. We have been spending the past 6 months, constantly calling news and reporters, changing pronouns because they're misgendering. Not only, it's like we call it a double murder because these women are being killed, and then on top of it, they're being misgendered, and the dignity and respect that they should be treated with is being pushed to the side. And so that's how I see us play in all of this. And then take the platform of June. That's why I was like, I'm happy it's June. I'm happy it's Pride. We have a big platform at this moment in time, and we get to use that. We get to direct the narrative. And so that's what we're doing.
Heidi, how does celebration of Pride go forward in the future in the face of COVID, racial injustice, all the things that are happening at this month and this time? How does it change it for the future, in your opinion?
I think, like we've all said, we had the platform of June being Pride Month. So to Sergey's point, there was a lot that was baked in already and that we were able to elevate the conversation. I think now that we have that and we kind of have a roadmap, if you will, of there's new coalition building happening. There's people that weren't talking to each other that are now talking to each other and maintaining that energy. I keep saying that because I just want to stress that point, that what we're doing this month, we should be doing every month. So keep doing the work. So I think for me, what Pride looks like is that it's more inclusive, because that's something we've always struggled with, no matter what city you're in. And I think it's more substantive in some ways, because I think we actually have a little bit of an agenda. Because I think there's always that major thing that we're fighting for, like it's marriage equality. We just got the Supreme Court rulings. We now have another thing that we're rallying around, and if we do it, if we are authentic in our intentions and we are intentional in our work, we have a great long-term strategy plan as a community that we can hold political officials accountable to. Sarah, you can hold heads of studios to. I just feel like there's so much fodder out there, and then we just, like I keep saying, we have to keep the energy, we have to keep building on it. So that's what I see Pride doing. It still can be a celebration because there's plenty of Black joy and queer joy out there to celebrate, but let's do something that's actually going to affect the next generation and leave something better for them.
Does anyone on the panel have any advice for how to get through advocacy fatigue, right? If you're doing this every month, every year, all year is really important, but how do you get not just the community, but allies to stay engaged?
Is that for me? I'm sorry.
Yeah, sure. It's for anyone on the panel, but yeah, totally. Madonna, what do you think about that? How do you keep people engaged in a constant pressure all year long?
And I think it's just about telling our stories and staying in front of, this, the movement we have right now is incredibly focused and powerful. We just got to, have conversations with people. I think specifically, did you ask about allies? I'm sorry, that cut out there, and I didn't hear the entire.
Yeah, allies, people in the community. We were talking just about how this movement and momentum needs to stay happening all year long. So how do you fight advocacy and fatigue?
And also how do you fight fatigue of people being on Zoom meetings too? There's
True story.
We're all sort of walking the tightrope right now too of that, and keeping people engaged. And I think we're doing some programming. We already intended to do Pride 365 programming, where we're bringing different voices to the table and having conversations and providing resources for so many of the nonprofits that are around us and doing the great work. So basically, we were already going to do that, but we went into high gear, and we're starting some like 2 or 3 programs coming up over the next couple of months that we plan to do at least monthly, just to stay in front of and continue to have conversations at the table with our community, every demographic of our community, and try to provide, resources and outlets for people, whether we're in a virtual world or eventually we get into a space where we can be together physically, sort of how that will transpire over time. So, just I think continuing the conversations and making sure that people, it's very personal. So my friends love me for who I am, and I get to be who I am around my friends, and that's sort of, we want to lean into people who inspire us, who love us, who can help us tell our stories better. And I think also we have an opportunity to tell the stories better virtually than we would at a festival or even a parade.
Teek and Sarah, Ellis, I know we're getting ready to wrap up here, but Teek, how do you think we can keep advocacy and keep the pressure and the momentum up on all of these important movements that are happening now?
That's a good question. The how, I think, just really putting people's feet to the fire. If you're out here and you're sharing this information and you're protesting with us and you're out here in the streets, when this moment is over, and I'm noticing people's feeds have gone back to sharing like kittens and other stories, and no one's talking, we're not talking about Breonna Taylor, we're not talking about George Floyd. Okay, that's cool now, but how are we going to sustain this energy? How are we going to take this energy that was happening in social media, and what does it look like for that to transform into actual like structural change? And just on a note, we talk about fatigue. I think a lot of us are tired. I am on fumes right now. I'm really tired. But I think to fight fatigue, people sometimes you just take a break. Like when you're on the plane, they say you have to put your oxygen mask on first before you can do that for other people. So put your oxygen mask on first. Stop for a second. Take a break from social media. Take a break from the Zoom meetings. Give yourself some time to recharge, and let's like tag other people in. I'm about to tag out after this. I'm gonna tag somebody else in to do this work, and they can tag me back in. But like rotate and just make sure that we're taking care of ourselves physically and emotionally and spiritually, so we can continue to do this really sustainable.
And as we wrap up today, Sarah, Kit, Ellis, I've got to believe GLAAD has some ideas and some ways to help keep the momentum up.
Oh,
So we call a softball.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, we are. We've been working very closely. Actually, I will tell you a little bit of good news, which I think always helps to beat the fatigue.
We got to go full screen with you on good news. You're spotlighted. What do you got?
So we do an annual study on TV and streaming content on representation for the LGBTQ community. We've always counted people with disabilities. We've always counted people of color, and we've always counted queer people of color. And last year was the first time, and we've always pushed for more Black queer representation. Last year was the first time that we got more Black queer representation than white queer representation. So there's movement, and maybe that contributed to why there's such outrage, because we're humanizing the Black queer community, and we know that moves the needle. So there's a lot. Please join GLAAD, become a member at glaad.org. We can't do it without you all. We have a full agenda for the next year, an aggressive agenda. And I want to do one last thing. I know I'm going over, but I just want to point out that the Supreme Court ruling last Monday, was so much bigger than marriage equality. And I just want to unpack it for you for 1 second for this audience, and why that Black versus white, trans versus gay. So, marriage equality is very important. I'm married to my wife. I have 2 children. That is, for some people, marriage is important for some people. Every American deserves a job. Every American deserves to work without discrimination. Our trans community can barely get a job, much less keep a job, because of discrimination. And Black Americans, especially queer Black Americans, understand discrimination full stop on a job. And so what happened last week protects our community for the first time, because in almost half the states in the United States, you could simply be fired for being LGBTQ. You could get married on Saturday and fired on Monday from your job. And so that is, that it's not as big a deal as marriage equality. I understand love and emotion, and that's why it's more celebrated than work. Who wants to celebrate work? But I need to point that out because I think it's really important. Thank you.
No, thank you very much.
That was super important. Thank you.
And thanks to everyone on this panel today. Do me a favor when you get a chance, when we stop being live on the Blade page, you can just pop in the comments and leave the website for your organizations and how people can get involved. If you have some tips or some things you want people to know as they're watching this, because once we're done being live, it goes back to the beginning and it lives on the Blade pages. So please do that. And thank you so much to all of our panel today. Heidi Ellis, Sarah Kate Ellis, Teak Milan, Madonna Cacciatore. I really appreciate everyone taking the time, getting involved in one more Zoom call, because goodness knows we've been on a lot of them, and spreading some great information about global pride here with The Blade, brought to you by the Ariadne Getty Foundation. I'm Tommy McFly in Washington. You can get onto our Real Fun DC channel that we have, which is a local DC based content platform that celebrates all the good about Washington. There is good out there about Washington, I promise you. Just say, Alexa, enable Real Fun DC. Have a great rest of your day. Have a very safe and healthy rest of your Pride Month. And thank you so much to everybody who joined us live. If you came in late, the show starts in the beginning, just as soon as we wrap up. Thank you.